many things attracted me to nonprofit work. So this is coming out of a for-profit environment, one of the world's largest iconic companies. Very proud to say it's AT&T. Worked there for 2.5 decades in a very, very competitive, cutthroat environment. So the question is, what attracted me to nonprofit work? And there's many things, actually, but it's not so much a nonprofit environment. I mean, certainly I'd never worked in a non-for-profit environment, although I had been a high school math teacher. But I also like the allure of a small business environment. Now, a company like AT&T with business units and subsidiaries and things of that sort, I mean, 2.5 decades, I had some absolutely incredible experience, and not necessarily homogeneous type experiences, but opportunities to lead groups, to step out of my comfort zone. I was trained as a finance team professional as a CFO, but if you wanted to rise, you were encouraged to step out and run a customer service center. So many, many things that were inspiring and exciting. However, I really had no understanding of the nonprofit environment, what it contributes to individuals and the public interest. And there was definitely some allure to see what that was like, to see what a smaller business environment was like, one where you don't necessarily have automatic funding and big machinery to support you. And also what attracted me to nonprofit work, and in the particular case of IMA, is kind of an extreme turnaround environment. So although I've been involved in all kinds of businesses at AT&T, startups, takedowns, et cetera, I had actually never been directly involved in a turnaround environment. And the reality is many nonprofits, as they seek to run themselves like businesses with goals and mission statements and resource allocation and all those kinds of things, are finding that they need to run themselves as professional businesses. So to be honest, I was actually in my 40s, kind of dating myself here, but in my 40s, late 40s to be exact, had a wonderful career. And so the question is, why would you want to change what was a good thing and on the promotion track and all that? And I just looked at it as new opportunities to learn, to grow, to influence, to make a difference, and have some fun. And it kind of shows that you can do that at any stage in your career, either leading up to the CEO or even after you've become CEO, because there's just so much more to learn and to do. In terms of transitioning from a for-profit, large for-profit, to a small to medium-sized non-for-profit, I actually expected there to be many more differences than what I've found after 10 years, over 10 years being in a non-for-profit and over 7 years as the organization's CEO. So what do I mean by that? So in terms of what is different, and again, this was a much smaller list than I expected, but things like different structure. So the fact that you are a non-for-profit, a tax-exempt C3 or C6 or whatever, means that you have to report your financial statements differently. There's different structural things that you need to do. Instead of filing in a for-profit company a 10K or a 10Q as your annual or quarterly financial statement, you file a 990 as a nonprofit. But, you know, that's relatively straightforward. I mean, that's a challenge that is pretty darn easy, I think. I think the harder challenges, if I had to categorize them that way, challenges that didn't necessarily have the experience for, first and foremost is collaborating with volunteers. And, you know, in a for-profit organization, if someone isn't performing on a corporate committee, for example, and you're in a position of authority, you can fire that individual or get them off the project. So there's a whole art and a whole science, as I've learned over the years, in collaborating with volunteers to give them a great experience, but also to create a great outcome for members, for customers, for society. And, you know, as I said, there's a definite art and a definite science to doing that. You know, if you have a difficult volunteer on a committee, does that mean that you have to live with that situation? No, you don't have to live with the situation. Just like for-profit companies can, quote-unquote, fire bad customers, in a well-governed non-for-profit, you can fire bad volunteers, and by that I mean your core values and your culture. Your core values and your culture, especially in a non-for-profit with volunteers, should apply not only to the paid staff but to the entire volunteer and member community, which rewards certain behaviors and perhaps doesn't permit other types of behaviors. So that whole area, collaborating with volunteers, definitely the biggest challenge, but also the greatest opportunity to leverage people who are inspired to serve a cause, to serve a mission, to do the right thing. They do need to be directed. I often tell the staff that we are CROs, Chief Reminding Officers, because we do this for a living every day, and we have the context from day to day of a particular situation, a chapter issue, a market issue, a new release, and our volunteers don't necessarily have that day to day, so we have to continually remind. I would say the other challenge is kind of an interesting one, and that's the whole area of competition. And when I started in a non-for-profit, again, I had certain assumptions that were quickly changed about life in a non-for-profit environment. I'm very excited to report that a decade later, including 7 years as CEO, I'm as invigorated and inspired as I was in a for-profit environment, and that's because the pace is fast. Members are very much the same as customers and shareholders. They have expectations for value. They have expectations that you're going to take their hard-earned dues, or what would have been an investment in a for-profit, and use it for good purposes. So all of those things are expectations that we take seriously. But the reality is, just like industry in general, facing consolidation, commoditization, and competition, I would argue, in a non-for-profit is good, as long as you focus on mission, and as long as you remember that the organization you're competing with, you may also be collaborating with for the public interest. And that is much, much trickier and much more of a challenge in a non-for-profit environment than in a for-profit environment. In a for-profit environment, it's fair game to want to kick your competitors, you know what, and innovate ahead of them and first mover advantage. In a non-for-profit environment, yes, competition, I believe, creates stronger, edgier, innovative, provocative organizations, but you also have to remember that there's a level of collaboration for the public interest and societal cause of the non-for-profit in a certain industry, in accounting, in finance, and medical devices. So that's how I would summarize it. Many, many challenges, but I was able to leverage 2.5 decades of business experience, which every ounce of it is being used in the non-for-profit environment. As I've inferred and maybe even directly stated, I think there's actually way more similarities, which I think is a good thing, because it's a great way to leverage experiences in different environments to serve customers, serve members, serve society, create greater organizational capability. I'd actually like to touch on a similarity that I have not really referenced, and that's, sounds slightly controversial, but making money in a non-for-profit is okay. Now, what you call it, obviously in terms of your tax-exempt status and what you call the bottom line and the fact that your purpose has to be a societal, educational purpose, that is all part of compliance with being a tax-exempt mission education-oriented organization. But like any business, if you're not creating value for some constituency or constituencies, you're not going to serve mission, you're not going to sustain your growth, and you almost have no right to be in business if you're not delivering value to some group of constituents. So making money is perfectly okay in the spirit of no money, no mission. If you are able to run an efficient operation, if you view yourself as the caretaker of your members' dues, much like we view it with a shareholder and their hard-earned investment, if you have target markets and growth initiatives and great new products and services that you're innovating to create stronger careers and stronger organizations, and you make money that allows you to reinvest in even more products and services. One of the things that we've tried to do at our organization here is plow back these retained earnings into products and services like our Leadership Academy. Given the role of the CFO in growing the organization, not just counting the beans, so to speak, but sprouting the beans, they need a lot of assistance from a competency perspective and leadership development and talking to investors and talking to customers and governmental entities around the world is one of the reasons we built this Leadership Academy, which we did because we're financially disciplined and use that money to invest in this new product called the Leadership Academy with no incremental fees to our members. So making money is perfectly okay. No money, no mission. I already mentioned similarities between for-profit and non-for-profit, like the quest for value, like innovating and first mover advantage, like risk management. Another area that you may not expect, or I certainly wouldn't have expected when I transitioned from for-profit to non, is M&A, merger and acquisition activity. We're in a non-for-profit environment, we're talking about merging and consolidating? Absolutely. We should be talking about organic or internal growth through new products, new services, new markets, but because the environment is so global and competitive, regardless of where you are in the non-for-profit space, there is the environment that I've referred to earlier of commoditization. Everything begins to look the same. Consolidation, where entities are finding either defensively or offensively they need to combine to better serve their respective missions in society. And then part of all of that is competition, legitimate, fierce competition. So that requires an M&A process, a merger and acquisition process, which perhaps would be better called merger and collaboration in a non-for-profit environment. And there's many, many examples of that. In terms of differences, the nature of the volunteer environment, as I alluded to earlier, collaborating with volunteers, making them feel valued, addressing issues relative to core values and things of that sort. I will tell you, when I became CEO about 7 or 8 years ago, one of my immediate learnings was how to work with a board, a large and diverse board, engineering a turnaround. And I'm very pleased with that relationship. My very first board chair as I was transitioning in was John Polera, who actually worked with Doug Eady to transform IMA's governance structure a little over a decade ago to a much leaner, organization with a greater degree of professional skepticism. And I think that's a talent we've learned here at IMA, which is something I strongly recommend. You must have with your board as CEO and the senior leadership team what I like to call a culture of challenge. I mean, it's perfectly fine to have friendly, positive relations, but the way things get done is dealing with tough situations head on and challenging one another. The board must step up to its oversight responsibility. The board must embrace a culture of risk management and understanding risks and asking the CEO the tough questions. This is business. We have shareholders or stakeholders and members who are counting on us, and we're obligated to be challenging each other. And I'm pleased to say that even though we do have a large and diverse board, so my board chairs range from John Pallera, as I mentioned, to actually a young professional, Ben Mulling, today, who's the chairman of our board, was CFO at the age of 28 and is now chairman of our board. And we embrace and encourage that culture of challenge. It's not for everyone, but it absolutely is necessary as part of the governing structure to sustain growth and relevance in a highly competitive and consolidating environment.